Tracing my biological father was like trying to follow footprints in a storm. Every step I took seemed to erase the one before it. He had left no photos, no official records, no digital trace that the modern world could catch. It was as if he were a shadow more than a man, something that existed only when you weren't looking. But shadows leave consequences, and those consequences were the only clues I had. I started with the names mentioned in the letters I found in the box. People my biological mother trusted decades ago, though the letters made it clear trust was a luxury she rarely had. One name led me to a police officer, now retired, who agreed to meet me in a quiet cafe far from the city. When I said my father's name, the color drained from his face. He didn't even hide the fear, real fear that flickered in his eyes. He leaned forward, speaking in a low voice like the walls had ears. "Some people," he said, "don't disappear because they died. They disappear because they're hiding from someone worse." His words settled on my skin like cold ash. I pressed him for more, but he refused. "Walk away," he warned. "If you love your life, walk away from whatever blood you came from." But that was the problem. Now that the truth had cracked open my life, I couldn't walk away. Curiosity had mutated into something heavier, something sharper. It was no longer about answers. It was about identity. I needed to know who I came from, even if that truth was wrapped in darkness. The deeper I dug, the more I sensed something shifting around me. It started small, a phone call with a silent line on the other end. Then another, and another. At first I told myself it was a coincidence. Telemarketers, wrong numbers, someone dialing by mistake. But the calls came at the same time every night, always after midnight, always hanging up the second I breathed a hello. Then came the footsteps. I would walk home and hear them behind me, perfectly matched with my pace. If I slowed, they slowed. If I stopped, they stopped. But whenever I turned around, there was nothing, just the empty sidewalk and the hum of streetlights. The paranoia crept up on me slowly, tightening around my ribs like a belt. I started checking behind me everywhere I went, scanning reflections in windows, looking twice at every car parked longer than usual. My life no longer felt like my own. It felt like I'd stepped into someone else's nightmare. And the signs kept growing. One afternoon, I came home to find my mailbox open. Not just open, emptied. Every letter gone. Bills, ads, everything. I reported it, but the officer barely shrugged. "Probably kids messing around," he said. But kids don't steal only mail from one specific house. Kids don't remove every piece of paper like they're looking for something. Kids don't move silently enough that you never hear a thing. That night, I barely slept. Every creak of the house felt like a warning. Every gust of wind against the window felt like someone standing outside, waiting. I tried to retrace my steps, to see where I might have been followed, but I always came up empty. Still, the feeling grew. Someone didn't want this truth resurfacing. Someone didn't want me knowing who my biological father really was. And for the first time, I wondered if maybe I wasn't just chasing a ghost. Maybe the ghost had started chasing me. It escalated again the night I found the note. I was leaving the grocery store trying to pretend life was still normal, trying to focus on mundane tasks like buying bread and vegetables. For a moment, I actually felt calm. But when I reached my car and saw the scrap of paper tucked under my windshield wiper, my heart turned to stone. The note didn't have a name? No greeting. No explanation. Just one sentence written in sharp, angry handwriting. "Stop, for your own good." My hands shook as I read it. Not because of the words themselves, but because someone had been close enough to my car, close enough to me to leave it without being seen. Someone was watching me, following me, tracking every move I made. And whoever it was, they knew exactly what I was looking for that night. I sat on my bed staring at the note like it might answer the questions spinning in my head. Was it my biological father? Someone connected to him? Someone who feared what secrets I might uncover? Or someone who simply wanted to keep me from digging up a past that should have stayed buried? I felt both small and exposed, like a spotlight had been turned on me in a dark room. The walls of my life were closing in, and suddenly, My quest for truth felt less like a mission and more like a trap. Still, even fear couldn't make me stop. The note only confirmed that the truth mattered, that whatever my father had done, whatever world he belonged to, it wasn't just history. It was alive. It had teeth, and now it was looking at me. Every part of me wanted to turn back to pretend none of this had started, to go back to a life where I believed my biggest problems were ordinary. But ordinary was a lie. My entire life had been shaped by a man I'd never met. A man whose presence lingered in the shadows of every faded photograph and every silence my mother held. A man whose choices had forced my biological mother to disappear, forced my adopted parents to uproot their entire world, and now possibly forced someone to stalk me through the night. I realized then that I wasn't just searching for the truth anymore. I was pulling on a thread tied to people who didn't want to be found. And if I kept pulling, something was going to break. Maybe me. Maybe the life I thought I had. Maybe the past itself. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. Whoever the man in the shadows was, he wasn't done with me. And maybe he never had been. The trail eventually dragged me to a remote town tucked between mountains and long-abandoned railway tracks. The kind of place where outsiders are noticed before they even step out of their car. The streets felt frozen in time, old signs, rusted fences, and people who carried the quiet weight of too many secrets. When I showed the photo of my biological mother around, most people brushed me off, claiming they didn't recognize her. But one woman, a frail shopkeeper with silver hair pulled into a trembling bun, stared at the photo longer than the rest. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't gasp. She just softened, like she was seeing a ghost she had once loved. When she finally spoke, her voice cracked. "You look exactly like her," she whispered. "Same eyes. Same expression when you're scared." The way she said it made my stomach twist. She motioned for me to follow her behind the counter, away from anyone listening. In the dim back room, she told me my biological mother had come here once, years ago. Not to hide, but to fight. To find a permanent way to sever every tie that connected her to the man she feared. She wasn't running from him, the woman said. She was running for you. Her words punched the air out of my chest. I'd spent days believing my mother disappeared because she was terrified. But the truth was heavier. She was trying to shield me from a man who believed children were possessions. Who believed he had a right to claim me like property. A man who didn't want a family, he wanted control. The shopkeeper lowered her voice even more. "Your mother said he would never stop looking, that he'd burn the world down before he let go." I felt my hands shake as she continued. She begged for help, not for herself, for you. She asked how to disappear completely, how to leave no trace a monster could follow. That last word, monster, echoed through my bones. When I asked if she knew what happened afterward, the woman simply shook her head. She left this town crying. That's all I remember. She said if she found the right place to hide her child, she'd never look back. Didn't realize it at the time. But that was probably the day she handed me over to the only people she trusted to keep me alive. By the time I left the shop, the sky had turned a bruised, stormy gray. The mountains loomed over the town like silent judges. I checked into a small roadside motel. It's one of those places where the wallpaper peels and the smell of old cigarettes lingers deep in the walls. I was exhausted mentally, emotionally, physically. All I wanted was to sleep and process everything I had just learned. But the night had other plans. At around 3 a.m, a sound pulled me from sleep. Soft, sharp. A metallic click. At first, I thought it was part of a dream. But when the sound happened again, louder adrenaline snapped through me. I sat up slowly, barely breathing. The room was dark, the only light bleeding through the thin curtains. I waited. Silence. Then, a soft scrape across the floor. My heart thundered in my chest as I reached for the lamp. I clicked it on. My blood went cold. There were muddy footprints on the carpet. They weren't mine. They weren't from earlier. They were fresh, wet, smudged, leading directly toward the small desk where I had placed the box of documents. Not the bed. Not my bag. Not my wallet. Only the box. Someone had been in the room. Someone who knew exactly what I was carrying. Someone who wasn't afraid to walk inches from where I slept. The fear was so sharp it almost paralyzed me. I checked the door. The lock was still latched from the inside. The window too high to enter quietly. Whoever had come in knew what they were doing. Knew how to slip through a crack I didn't even notice. And they hadn't taken anything. They had searched. They were looking for something specific, and they believed it was with me. I felt eyes on me long after they were gone. That was the moment everything changed. The moment the danger stopped being an idea and became a presence breathing down my neck. I knew then that whoever had been stalking me wasn't some random threat. It wasn't paranoia. It wasn't imagination. It was him. The man who had ruined my mother's life. The man my adopted parents had feared for years. The man whose shadow followed every step of my existence. My biological father wasn't just a dangerous past. He was a dangerous present. He was here. And he was close. The walls of the motel felt too thin after that. Every sound made me jump. Every moment of silence felt like something was waiting on the other side of the door. I grabbed the box, shoved everything inside my backpack, and left the motel before dawn. As I drove away, I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following. The road was empty, but emptiness didn't feel safe anymore. It felt like the perfect place for someone to hide. But here's the thing about fear. Once it settles inside you, it becomes fuel. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I wasn't the child my mother had protected. I was the adult that danger had created. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't just chasing the truth. I was closing in on it. Whatever final confrontation waited for me with my father, with the past. With the darkness that shaped my life. It was already unfolding. The muddy footprints were a message. He had found my trail, and now, whether I was ready or not, I was about to find him. The final piece of the puzzle came when I least expected it. Landing in my life with the quiet force of something that had been waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. I received a message from a woman I had never heard of. No name, no explanation. Just a brief line asking me to meet her if I wanted answers that matter. Every instinct told me to ignore it. But curiosity had already carved its home inside me, and I knew I couldn't stop now. So I went. The meeting place was a small cafe on the edge of another forgotten town. It's the kind of place where silence clung to the walls. When I walked in, a woman in her late 50s stood from a corner table. Her posture was tense, her eyes cautious. She studied my face like she was comparing me to a memory. And after a long, painful pause, she said, "You look exactly like your mother the day she left." Her voice cracked halfway through the sentence. And before I even sat down, I felt the world shift under my feet. She introduced herself as someone who had been protecting my biological mother for decades. Not as a friend, not as a relative, but as a guardian by choice. Someone who had seen the damage my father caused and vowed to make sure it never reached me again. She told me my mother wasn't dead. She hadn't vanished without a trace. She had built a quiet life in a place no one from her past could find her. A life where she didn't have to look over her shoulder every second. But even in her isolation, she never stopped thinking about me. "Your mother loved you enough to erase herself," the woman said, and those words tore through me like a blade. I had spent my entire life wondering if I had been unwanted, abandoned, forgotten. Instead, the truth was the complete opposite. I had been cherished enough to be hidden, loved enough to be protected from a world too dangerous to let me grow inside it. When I asked why my mother never came back, why she never tried to contact me, never tried to explain, the woman handed me a single envelope. It was old, the paper soft and yellowed from time. On the front, written in a handwriting I didn't recognize but instantly felt connected to, was my name. My real name, the one I had never known existed. My hands shook as I opened it, and inside was a letter that felt like a heartbeat. "You were never meant to inherit my fear," it began. "Every decision I made was for your safety, not my absence. Live your life, not my past." I stopped reading halfway through because the tears blurred the ink. That one sentence shattered something inside me. The doubt, the confusion, the questions that had gnawed at me for years. And at the same time, it healed something deeper. The part of me that had never understood why my life felt unfinished. Now it made sense. My story hadn't been missing pieces. It had been protected pieces, guarded pieces, pieces that were never meant to weigh me down.